Welcome back, everybody, to another Maledictor devlog. We're going to be kind of breezing through a lot of this here because we have got a huge update. Because I skipped November. And it's not because I didn't do anything in November, it is because I was actually doing a lot. And I kept on wanting to wait until I had E1M4 done so I could just include that in the logs. And I kept on getting sidetracked and moving on. And by the time that I finished E1M4, spoilers, I guess, it was already halfway through November. So I decided that I was going to package November and December together. So ordinarily, I have the updates on the screen, but as you can see, it is a bit much right now. So I'm just going to try to fly through these here because it's a lot, and I don't want this video to be half an hour long. So, first off, Pursuit of Truth Episode 1 is finished. So, that is the conspiracy theory show about conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. Got that done and put in game. It came out pretty good, I have to say. I actually really like it. It's going to be difficult to come up with more things for future episodes because like I mentioned before, I want to avoid modern day political things. I just want it to be a fun radio show that everybody can enjoy. So, a little limited in that respect, but I think I can get another 2 episodes out of it. The reason why I want 2 episodes out is because I want to have 1 per episode of the game. I want to have 3 episodes in the game, so I want to have ultimately 3 episodes of Pursuit of Truth. So next we've got E1M4 lights put in, E1M4 props put in, got more models made, which is very nice. Every time I make a new model, I can always put it into previous levels and fill out the levels a lot more. Where it's appropriate. I'm not like sculpting a big statue and then throwing that statue into every level or anything. But, some things like chairs and tables, you can fit them in where they're appropriate. Next, more interactables. Love getting more of these in because they make the game a lot more fun. That's one of the big things about these sorts of games, especially. The boomer shooters, they always had a lot of things that you could just have fun with, like especially the build engine games like Duke Nukem and Blood. There were always things that you could interact with in some way, whether you were just shooting it and blowing it up, or you were pressing an interact key on it and getting a comment from somebody, or changing things. Just a lot of fun potential in interactables. So I'm always really happy to get those in. Next, more sprites. The tradition continues. Always getting more sprites into the game, and always happy to get them in. Same reason as getting more models in. Always work them in to other areas where they're appropriate. That's kind of a weird one that might seem a little unrelated, but learning Linux. So, learning Linux is going to be nice for Maledictor because I want to have native Linux support. Now, anybody who's played games on Linux recently, within the last couple of years or so, knows that pretty much, even if a game's not natively coded for Linux, Steam has Proton packaged into it, and most games that, as long as they don't have an anti-cheat, work just fine on Linux with very little input. But it's always helpful to have a Linux-specific build. If I can, why not? Now, I'm not sure necessarily how nicely those things play between distros. I know that Unreal made their editor specifically with Ubuntu in mind. So things like Linux Mint. But I'm running on Linux Fedora, so that's GNOME architecture. But it works just fine, so ideally, it should work just fine between all the different distributions. If not, I have confidence that Linux people can figure it out, especially if it's running something Linux to Linux rather than Windows to Linux. So hopefully that'll be fine. But anyway, altered destructible walls. So before they weren't really breaking the way that I wanted them to. Now they fragment a little bit more than before, so that it feels a little bit more destructive. And when you blow up a wall, it just feels nicer. Next, improved level effect performance. And I gotta be honest here, I don't really remember what this is. This was back in November, so yeah, I'm not entirely sure I remember what this is, but I'll take my word for it. Better performance. I'll take those wherever I can get them. Next, fixed a Molotov bug. Basically, the Molotov had an issue where you would throw it and it would blow up because it was colliding with you when it spawned. So before, I just set it up to ignore pawns so that it would blow up when it would stop. But that also means that it would just pass through enemies. So you couldn't direct hit enemies with Molotovs. So now it ignores specifically the player. Now that I understand how these things work a little bit better, now they ignore the player. They'll still be able to damage you, but they won't impact on you. But they will impact on enemies now. So you can direct hit enemies. You'll still be able to light yourself on fire with them, so, watch out for that. But now, best of both worlds. We can hit the enemies and not ourselves. Next, model fixes. So model fixes is mainly just when I was just starting out with making this, I didn't really understand the modeling tools that well. So a lot of the models, and I did some complex models compared to a lot of the stuff that I do now. That's not to say that now I'm lazy with it, but now I understand things a little bit better, and I haven't had to do any like massive set pieces like the houses that I did in E1M1. So one of the things I was running into is now when I go back and look at some of my old models, I'm seeing issues like some broken vertexes and things like that. So just been going in and I've been fixing them so that now they are nice. They're basically just nice and clean, and cleaning up issues with old models so that textures don't look all stretched and things. So making them look a lot better now. Next, we've got material adjustments. That's mostly things like with certain metals, making them a little shinier, like gold is now a lot more reflective. Sorry, been sick for the last couple of days, so still getting over it. Anyway, and also just fixing the tiling on certain things. So there's some effects that I that I put over some of the textures so that they have a little bit more variation in them, but that can make the tiling a little bit more obvious if you do it wrong. So I've been tweaking that a little bit more so that now the tiling is a lot better and the variation looks a lot better. So now the variation's a bit more subtle, which is good because before it was a little too much. So now I think it's a lot better. Next, destructible bug fix. Again, I don't actually remember what this one was, but I don't think it's too much of a leap of faith to assume that something that I made could have a bug in it and that I would later find it and fix it. Next, we've got improved E1M2 performance. The E1M2 performance improvement is mostly to do with the lighting. And why don't I just load into E1M2 real quick? I'm trying to keep this really short so that we're not going to hit, a half hour here. So if we look at our lights, before these lights you see this edge here, that's the light's attenuation radius. That's basically how far it travels out. And one of the things that I had before that was kind of an issue is when when you have an increased attenuation radius, that means that your light travels farther, but that it also needs to be calculated more. And that means that if it starts casting shadows, then you're going to start having competing shadows from multiple light sources that are all overlapping. And that takes a hit to performance. So, what I did with a lot of these lights is I shrunk down the attenuation radius to more match their fall off distance so that they don't really look any different, but now they perform a lot better. And I went in and I changed up their fall off so that, or their fade in, I mean. So, lights in Unreal you can set to fade in and out based off of how far away they are from the player. And that is very good for performance. So I went through and I made sure to tweak all of the fade in and outs for the different lights. And another thing that I've been doing is before I had the lights all kind of packaged together with the sprites, depending on what the light was. Now I separate them out from I separate the lights out from the sprites. And so now I put the sprites down and then I put the lights in. And the problem that I was running into before was when they were coupled together like that, I couldn't set the lights to be just dynamic. More like pseudo dynamic. There's you see here in mobility, you have static, which is fully baked lighting, so no dynamic lighting whatsoever. You got stationary, which is mostly dynamic. It's partially baked lighting, but it's still mostly dynamic. And then you've got movable, which is rendered live as you're playing it. And before, when they were packaged together, the lights were all forced to be movable. So everything, all the lighting was being rendered live as you were playing it. Now, the majority of the lights are stationary, so they're baked and dynamic. So now the performance is much, much, much better, and I've noticed a difference. So, really happy about that. Next, added new rooms in E1M2. I could show you them, but I'm not going to. It's nothing too big. I just mostly wanted to kind of expand out these levels a little bit more as I go, so that I want to add in little side areas that you don't need them for progression in the levels, but they're there so you can find pickups and just make the areas feel a little bit more alive and feel a little less like, oh yeah, I'm in a video game. So that feels way better already. Next is a fix for key pickup radius, which is kind of a two-pronged issue that I fixed. When I started, for all the pickups, I was using collision boxes, which is not exactly ideal because you can have an inconsistent pickup radius depending on which angle of the box you're approaching it from. So I changed them now to collision spheres so that now it's a consistent distance to pick up the item, and I also increased the radius so that now you can pick them up from a little bit farther away. Then E1M4 enemies and traps put in, E1M4 secrets put in, and E1M4 pickups put in. So more progress on E1M4. And then the one of those big little distractions comes in. Max ammo reduced. So one of the things that I'm trying to focus on a little bit more now is balance. Not just for enemies, but for the player as well. And when I put in the backpack, I realized that the player ammo count was way too high. It's so high that you would literally never hit your ammo capacity. So you would never be able to max your ammo. Now, I've significantly reduced your maximum, which sounds like a big nerf, but realistically, it's much better in terms of balance, but also it's more enjoyable. I know this sounds kind of like a weird thing of, I'm I'm taking things away from you because it's for your own good. But for instance, max shotgun shells going from 60 to 15. So you're much more limited on your shotgun ammo. And that's nice because now it incentivizes using it. It's not necessarily a reduction in how much ammo you find, but it's a reduction in how much you can carry. So that now you're going to find a lot more scenarios where you're going to be thinking, okay, well, I have maximum ammo and there's ammo laying around, so I'd better use it. So you're much more likely to use the guns that you want. You're much less likely to try to hoard ammo. Next, we've got max adrenaline was reduced as well. So adrenaline, for people who haven't played the game, is you have some mobile heals. You basically have a heal that you carry with you. That's gone from 2 to 1. So that now you still find heals around in the levels, but this is more for like combat healing. And so now you're basically have the amount that you can carry. You can only carry 1 now, but it heals from, it used to heal 50 health, now it heals 100. So it's a much stronger heal. Next is backpack max ammo increase. It used to be times 1.5. It is now times 2. So if you manage to find the backpack, then you are going to be a lot closer to the old values. Some you will be at the old values, like Molotovs. I brought those from 20 to 10. So if you find the backpack, you'll be right back at 20. Others, like the shotgun shells, you're going from 15 to 30. And the max before was 60. So you're still, even with twice the ammo capacity, you're still only at half of what you used to be able to carry. But that's because you used to be able to carry way too much. So just tweaking that. I'm sure I will tweak the backpack ammo increase a bit more as well. Mainly because, like, right now, I'm just trying to balance the base values and then later worry about things like the backpack increase. Speaking of adrenaline, fixed a bug with the adrenaline when you were dying. There was a problem before where if you brought up the adrenaline to heal, like your character brings it up and then stabs it in, and then it heals. If you brought it up and then died, you'd still finish the stab and you'd still get healed, and you would have more than 0 health, but you'd still be dead. So I fixed it now so that if you die while healing, you don't get the health, but it also applies the health earlier, so that now you are much less likely to die in the middle of healing. So you still have to time it out correctly, but it feels a lot better now. And then we've got adjusted ammo pickup amounts. So, the ammo pickup amounts before were much higher. Now they're reduced a lot more, some more than others, so that now they play a little bit better with your ammo counts, because now you're not going to... If it was the way that it was before, you would pick up one stack of shotgun shells and you'd be, almost maxed. So tweak that a little bit more. Sound blocker visibility fixed. That's a big one. Before, the enemies seemed a little stupid for multiple reasons, but one was because the sound blockers, they're supposed to only block sound, but I found that they were also blocking visibility too, so they were just like walls. So now the enemies can see you through sound blockers, which is very good, because now it's working as intended. Next, E1M4 is finished. So we got that done, and it took a while to finish it, but fortunately from the alpha testing, and I guess spoilers on a future note that we're going to be getting to soon there, the alpha testers have been saying that they have been liking E1M4 a lot, so it seems to be worth it. A lot of people are saying that that's the best level so far, so that's great. Next, Shotgun Cultist Balance. I basically made it so that the shotgun projectiles for the enemy are a lot slower, so that now you can dodge them at range. They will still mess you up really badly close range. They're still extraordinarily dangerous close range. But now they're much more likely to wing you if they shoot at you from medium range. I also increased their health, and I think I also decreased their movement speed, so that now they're a little bit more vulnerable in that regard, but they're basically tanks that are extraordinarily dangerous close range. So I like them a lot better now. Next, Jibs rescaled. The Jib rescaling is much bigger than you would think. I did not like how the Jibs were before, and I found that the giblets were just way too big. So I scaled them down some more than others, and so now they immediately feel so much better. I like the Jibs a lot more now. I'm still not entirely happy with them. I haven't put a huge amount of time into the Jib effects. So, we're still working on enemy balance and player balance and making levels. So I figured that's one of those things I will get to later during, visual passes and things like that. Because I want the Jibs to be really good. But, right now they're a lot better than they were. So I'm happy with that. Next, end level data carries over, which is huge. It used to be that you would finish the level and all of your stuff would be gone. You'd be at a hook start for the next level. So now the game actually saves everything that you had at the end of the level, and it gives it back to you when you start the next level. Next, enemy fire particle fix. When you apply fire damage to an enemy, you get like a little ember that kind of burns on them to show you that they are taking fire damage. And that's supposed to just go away when they get engulfed or when, it eventually runs out. But what was happening was people would die, they'd get engulfed, they'd be running around on fire, and then their body would drop, and that ember particle would still be there. And it was a weird issue where in Unreal, you've got the is valid node. Like, if we go into our weapon select menu here, I can show you. There it is. Where you basically plug in an object to see essentially if it exists. And if it exists, then you do this. If it does not exist, then you do this. And that's good because that way you're avoiding errors. What would happen is if you try to say you try to delete a particle effect, but it doesn't exist, then you're going to get an error from the game. It's not going to crash or anything, but you'll get an error, and you generally want to avoid errors where you can. And so, the problem was not that I did not have that. The problem was that I was using it, and for some reason the game did not register that it was a valid particle, even though it was in the game. So now I work around that, and now it's fixed, so that now that ember goes away when it's supposed to. And next, enemy reaction times adjusted. So this was one of those things where the enemies simultaneously felt way too stupid and also way too good, all at the same time. So in addition to fixing the visibility with the sound blockers, one of the problems that I had was that the enemies would you'd shoot them, and they would kind of like look around like they just seemed dumb, and then they would suddenly spin and immediately shoot you. So it's the enemy reaction times adjusted fix. It's kind of like a double fix, where the fix was that they were maybe not necessarily reacting too fast, but that it looked like they were. So I did have delays coded in so that they wouldn't just spin and shoot you like that, but it just looked like it just looked like it wasn't there. So what was happening was that the code for them turning and looking at you was happening so fast it would immediately go into the shooting you code. And so now I've got a delay put in so that now you can see them turn and see you, so that you can actually see when they react. So now you can actually visually see that they are reacting, pretty promptly. But they are now no longer just spinning and aimbotting you. So that now it feels a lot more natural. And it feels a lot more fair. They feel a lot less stupid. So now it feels a lot more natural. I like it. It's a big change. Next, enemies' attacks cancel on death. This is another big one where, say, I noticed a lot, especially with the axe enemies, they'd rear back with the axe in their hands, so they're about to swing down, but I would kill them, and then I would get hit by the axe after they were dead. This could happen with all enemies. Like, I noticed that, especially with the submachine gun enemies that fire in a burst, they'd fire a shot, die, and then the rest of the bullets would come out. And so I found, basically I just added in a last minute check right before the attack goes out, like right before damage, or in the submachine gunner's case, right before the next burst goes out, they check if they're dead. And if they're dead, then it cancels the attack. So you don't have to worry about it. So that feels much better. Sorry for the sniffing. Still getting over that sickness. But anyway. Fixed close range jib lag. That was an issue where you would jib somebody and all the giblets would start colliding with you. And all the collision data all at once, that would cause it to lag a bit. So now, jibs pass through you. I liked the idea before that jibs could bounce off of you. But the thing is that never happened. So now it's just generating, it was just generating a bunch of collision data for no reason. So now they go through you, but it actually feels better. Like, it feels like the jibs are going over your head or like past you. So it feels a lot better now. I like it a lot more. And this is literally like if you're touching them distance. So ordinarily it seems to work. There's still some issues with that, with performance when they get jibbed really close up. I have a feeling it's some collision issues still, but for now it's better. And like I said, I'm gonna be addressing the jibbing stuff later on. Don't worry about that a little bit later. Fixed hatch rotation. So I made hatches so that now you've got doors that open side to side, and then hatches open up and down. And every now and then you'd get an issue where the hatches on a save load, the hatches would start opening side to side, which they're very clearly not supposed to. So now that's fixed. So they don't do that anymore. Speaking of jibs, fixed jibs clipping through E1M3 and E1M4. That's just a collision data issue. So got that fixed really easy. So now the giblets will bounce on the ground rather than passing through it. Then Alpha 3 is out on Windows and on Linux. And I wanted to have the Linux specific build for alphas, especially because I've got some friends who test the game who are just on Linux. So the Linux build so far has been a pretty good success. There's one major issue, not functionally, but just visually, where for some reason on the Linux build, a lot of the textures are red. I don't know why, but the good news is that they're not all red, which means I just have to look at the difference between the ones that are red and the ones that aren't, and then adjust that. So hopefully that won't be a huge issue. I don't think it will be, but you never know. Linux is a lot better than it has been, but it is still not easy. It's still got its own issues, but we'll work on that, and it's much better to get that worked on now so that there's no surprises when I'm ready to release the game. Then fix the cannonball clipping on cannon shot. This was something that would happen that I never tested for because I wasn't being stupid, but one of my friends decided he was just going to randomly shoot the wall right in front of him with the cannon shot, and found that he got the ball to bounce just right so that it flew out the front of the cannon shot cabinet. So I fixed that so that it will not do that anymore. You know, the importance of doing alpha testing. Next, fixed door saving incorrectly. There was a problem where you could save and load the game and it worked just fine, but if you saved and load twice in the same level, then the doors would relocate to 000 on the map, which is obviously a big problem. Fix that now so that it doesn't happen anymore. Next, fixed test buttons now work. So the sound test buttons. So now there's a sound test button in the menus so that you click the buttons and it will play a sound. So that way you don't have to go into the game and kind of like just find the sound and then go back into the menu and start tweaking them. You're able to test the sound in the menu, and now that works correctly. Next, voice volume slider is added so that now you can adjust voice volume. That's going to be things for like the enemy voices, for the player voice, things like that. You can adjust the volume for that now. Big thing now, controller support is now in game. I know it sounds weird to put controller support in a game like this, but that is actually a big deal for some people. And I'm not saying people, I'm not saying for people who are stupid. I'm saying basically it's an accessibility issue where there are some people, and I actually have friends who cannot physically use a mouse and keyboard for what they each have their own reason for it, but they can't use a mouse and keyboard. So controller support is actually really important for them. So I got controller support added in the game. The game works just fine with a controller. Next one, controller support added for menus. So that, for context, it took less than an hour to get the game running with a controller in game. It took about 4 or 5 days to get the controllers to work in menus. And next, game loading order fixed. This was an issue where you would save the game, exit the game or exit the level, and then load the save, and all the enemies that you killed would be alive again. And so obviously that's a huge problem, but once you were in the level, you could load the save again, and then everything would be correct. So basically the problem was that the game was loading everything all at the same time, and it was setting the enemy information for the previous level and also setting enemy information in for enemies that didn't exist. So now it waits for the level to be finished loading in and then sets everything. So now that all works correctly. Next, Steam integration added. I've started working on Steam input because I went to go add that my game had controller support onto the Steam page, and Steam insists that, maybe not everybody has an Xbox controller. Maybe some people only have a PlayStation controller. So if you want to say that you have full controller support, you basically need to have Steam input added. So got Steam integration added, which is something I would need to do anyway for things like achievements. And so then I added in Steam input. So now you can play the game with any controller. Once that's on Steam, you will be able to use any controller you want, which is really nice. I've tested it with an Xbox controller, which the game itself is coded for, so don't use Steam input for an Xbox controller. I guess you could, but why? But I've also tested it with a PlayStation controller, and for anyone who's tried to use a PlayStation controller on PC, you know that PlayStation controllers don't work with anything. So that's nice. That way you know it works. And now Steam input support is in menus. I actually had to go back in and redo a lot of the menus so that they would work with Steam input. It's frustrating for sure. You know, Unreal, for everything that is great about Unreal, you know, Epic still believes themselves to be legitimate competitors to Steam, so they don't want to add in native Steam support to the engine. So, you know, it's unfortunately you have to jump through some hoops to get all this stuff working, but you know, it's working so far. I still have some menus I need to do, but I feel relatively confident that I can rework all the menus to work with Steam input. An unfortunate thing about it is that a lot of that means that I'm having to work around Unreal's native controller support and basically get that to stop working so that I can hard code everything in so that all the controllers work. So I'm taking functionality out to put it back in, just in a different way. So that is where we are right now. And I said I didn't want it to be a half-hour long video, but I have the unfortunate feeling that maybe it might wind up being half an hour. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up now to get us out of here. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. I will be back next month to tell you all what I got done this month. So hopefully big progress will be made. Maybe not this much, but still some. So thanks a lot for watching, everybody. I will see you in the next update. Have a good one, everyone.